Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our latest episode of At the Coalface. Thank you for giving up your time. I know to give up an hour of time is quite a lot. There's a lot of content out there in terms of webinars and episodes of things like that dealing with fraud and financial crime. So we know it's really kind of you to give up that time, and hopefully you'll find this of use. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Arun Chauhan. I'm the director and founder of Tenet, a law firm that specialises in disputes, investigations and compliance arising out of fraud and financial crime. So the aim of these episodes, if you haven't been with us before, is to have a conversation with people dealing on the front line with fraud and financial crime. And previous episodes we've had have dealt with investigative journalism, internal audit on ESG and financial crimes. And we're going to post some of those previous episodes in the chat, which will be done by my colleague Paula. Today, I'm really pleased to have Adrian Jolly to join us from AJC. Adrian is a cybersecurity expert, and he's the managing director of AJC, and a link to their website will also be posted in the chat. I saw Adrian speak at an event maybe 6 months ago, hosted by We Fight Fraud, if you know that team. And Adrian just came across as someone who just tells it as it is, and I thought he's just absolutely perfect for having an episode here. So I've managed to cajole him to come along. So Adrian, thank you for joining us. Perhaps give a quick introduction about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron, and again, thanks for all your time. It's a privilege to be here. I've sat and listened on the other side, so great to be here. So we run a consultancy firm, but with, I guess, slight difference. Our goal is always to help and to guide and steer rather than to create confusion, which, in my humble opinion, a lot of consultancy firms do. We work in the cyberspace. We'll work in fraud, data protection, compliance, business continuity, all the necessary evils, all the really boring stuff that most people don't care about, but it's really important when it goes wrong. That's
really well helpful. It's not boring. Well, we'll make it not boring today anyway. That's the plan. So we've had about 100 people, just over about 105 registered for the event today, which is great. So we've got half of those have showed today, which is brilliant. Usual housekeeping stuff from me is that I still sit here and do these webinars from our motion light censored office. So that means halfway through it's probably going to go dark and I'm going to start waving my arms around like a crazy person. But apart from that, we're going to have a Q&A feedback form, which will be posted towards the end of the session. And we'll deal with Q&A at the end of the session after Adrian and I have chatted through. But please put your questions in the chat and we'll have a look for those towards the end. So the plan, as with all these sessions, is we go through 5 broad topics, and we're going to kind of meander our way through those over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. The first one is talking about cyber risk and who is really prepared. Is it really easier for the bigger organisations to be prepared with their budget and scope, or are smaller organisations more agile? Are they able to prepare for cyber threats and cyber risk? We're going to talk about simplifying dealing with cyber security. What should we really be doing to keep this simple and manageable, but also effective? What are the cyber threats we're not thinking about? What are the ones we're not dealing with? What's lurking in the shadows? So we're going to have a chat about that. The human firewall, a phrase I think many have used and heard before. It's, our first line of defense are our people. But what can we do to really ensure that we can rely on them? And what can we do to get strategic assurance? And then really, I want to talk about what's coming next. There's bits of legislation coming out. There's some consultation about ransomware coming out as well from the government. And I thought we'll just touch on those before we round up to Q&A. So dive straight in. I mentioned We Fight Fraud. Tony Sales from We Fight Fraud. I'm one of the. He was our first guest on these webinars, and he said something like he doesn't know any computer that has ever gone to prison. And when I talk about cyber, when I'm either delivering training or we're dealing with a kind of remedial action after the event for clients, trying to explain to clients that cyber isn't a fraud type. It's the means through which the threat is coming into an organisation, impersonation, or trying to grab data. I get the impression larger organisations do this better, though, and that's probably just maybe a naive thing, Adrian. I mean, they have greater risk, they've got greater assets, but they've got increased budget. In your experience, do you think they get it right over smaller organisations?
I think everyone's probably in the same boat. I think they have different risks. So if you look at a smaller organisation who just uses Office 365, and there's plenty of them out there, much easier to control because Microsoft are really helpful. They patch your stuff for you. They keep you up to date. You download your software. You keep much more in control. You know the people that are around. You're in a better place. Bigger organizations, big data, big systems, they struggle to control with making sure things are patched and up to date. I worked with a really large retailer who was very open and proud in saying, well, some of the servers, the jump servers within the network, they've never been able to patch because they need them 24/7. So they can be as bad as each other because they need to try and juggle this up. While smaller companies can be better, what they do is fall foul of the friendly environment. So it's always just been done that way. John's a really good person. He always does it. Mary's always updated our procedures. When those people aren't around, that's when the issues come into force. We did have a situation a little while ago with one of our new clients where the friendly IT person had taken exception to the boss and then was actively blackmailing him for money to get access to his systems and then denying him access to those systems. And whilst there's legal processes you could go through and all those sorts of things, it takes time. And can you really afford that downtime? So they are as bad as each other in some regards. And I guess the other thing to marry off in that is regulation. Right. So there is a wealth of regulation out there. You've rattled off half a dozen things. I could give you another 10 on top, impacts in the payment world and all sorts of others. The question then comes in is how do you deal with that? So the bigger organizations are looking at it thinking, how on earth do I deal with something like that, which is so vast? You talk about something like DORA and you're looking at vendor management and everyone goes, oh, that's easy, I'll do that. But DORA asks you to do 3 layers of vendor management. So actually you need to understand what your vendors are doing. So how do you actually do that for a big multinational like Barclays? How do you do some of these things like the contractuals and things like that, and the incidence and the cost of a failure? These are really hard, complex things. And then you get some of the smaller organizations who will say, and what's DORA? Why do I care? But now they're going to get all the hard work and the hard effort from Barclays at them. I need to understand why you're doing this because it's part of my regulation. So you've got that constant balance of small organizations not understanding what regulations they really need to comply with, and the big ones looking at it thinking of actually, how do we cope?
Yeah, so just on DORA, I was going to talk about that towards the end, but just briefly. Could you just, I mean, there may be quite a lot of people on the session who understand what's going to happen, what's happening with DORA. Do you want to just kind of give it the quick overview? What is it?
Yeah, it's about, it's live. It went live in January. It impacts all financial organizations and those organizations they work with. What it does do is it implies it's around operational resilience. So if you have a failure, how do you cope with that? What do you do? Understanding your vendor management, understanding your business continuity and crisis management, and understanding who you're going to talk to. The idea is about raising the bar of resilience, but in the same breath, it's around getting the control and things like that for everyone else.
And it applies to organisations small and large?
Yep. So anyone who's in the financial sector has to do that. Similarly, if they are a vendor of a third-party provider, they then have to fall part of the framework as well, because then it feeds out. So if you look at a good few years ago, there was a big attack on Sky and things like that. That was on a vendor. So the end vendor was compromised and then got access to the network. So now what they're trying to do through DORA is to understand where the vulnerabilities are in the supply chain, so that we know if this one organisation goes down, it takes a big chunk of the financial sector down.
Okay, so that's really what I was leading on to next. Is, you know, we're talking about DORA in terms of the financial sector, but in terms of other sectors, taking that kind of best practice, that understanding that your supply chain could actually be your access point to a cyber attack. And if you're a medium-sized organization, or if you're a smaller organization, what would you say is kind of the first two or three things they need to think about in terms of the risk that their supply chain could be the access point for a cyber attack? And should large organizations be ensuring that those smaller organizations are protected for their own benefit?
They have to, for DORA. They have to understand that as part of the process. That's the ethos. I think talking to many of the big organizations out there, they're struggling to work out how they're compliant with all of this as well. So there's a little bit of chicken and egg going on at the moment around, is someone really going to be fined for this or not? So they have an obligation to do that. But if you look at all the other regulations like GDPR, like the financial sector, like ISOs, every one of those has an obligation on people to know who your vendor is and to make sure that your data is safe. That's your obligation as an individual, or as an organization. If you are working with a company, you need to make sure that their data is safe. And if it's not, then that's on you, and you're the one who gets fined, potentially not the end person.
Okay, so when all, you know, smaller organisations or even larger organisations turn around and say, but you know what, Adrian, we're okay. We've got Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus or ISO 27001. What's your kind of thoughts about those? Really, are they actually any good? Does it?
I think Cyber Essentials is rubbish.
Right. Okay. Why?
That's probably the politest version. Cyber Essentials is just a glorified spreadsheet. So if you're versed enough in IT language, you could fill out that spreadsheet on your own with no clarification. You submit it. Someone who's ISME qualified then reviews it. It costs you 400 quid. You've then got Cyber Essentials, which qualifies you for governmental work. Right. CE Plus does a little bit of pen testing on your perimeter walls, but again, does nothing in terms of how you can actually respond to this. ISO becomes a little bit more interesting, certainly begins to drive governance structure, procedures, controls, show the evidence around it, show me the culture there. So ISO 27001 is a much better yardstick, but then hard for people to get, and costs money.
It does worry me though if you say Cyber Essentials is just a tick box exercise, if you know a few of the words and then that qualifies you for government work, that makes me slightly nervous. But if that's where we're at,
there is a project to upgrade it. Certainly some of the APPGs are looking at it, but in essence, glorified spreadsheet. If you know the right answers, you get a CE, and then you can put that all over your website and say you're CE certified.
And then just kind of moving on a little bit, we've talked about, you've got DORA for financial services, you've got all this other kind of guidance out there. I know what it's, when I'm speaking to organisations, you get the real sense, or in fact they tell you expressly, people are overwhelmed. They're beyond busy. People are overwhelmed. So when they get another policy, another procedure, another, you can't do this, you can do that, this is how we need to operate to be safe around a cyber kind of risk. How does your organisation go in and try and help organisations get their people to think about this as the day-to-day, the everyday part of the routine, without thinking it's another policy I'm having to follow?
I think often it's around simplification and making it so that people understand where they are in the scheme and why they do something. So you go into that, well, why do you want that data? Why would you hold it? Why would you do it that way? And you get some blank looks. I mean, I worked with a really large golf company, puts on some very large tours. I won't mention names. But the lady there was very, very proud when I sat down there and said that she had records of a golfer who'd been dead for 15 years. I've
Right.
got his mobile number, I've got his email address, I've got this, I've got that. And she was really proud. And you raised the question, well, why have you got it? I don't know, I've always had it, but I've got everything. I've got da. Well, I'm a bit concerned at that, because if he actually answers a phone when I call him, there's going to be all sorts of questions going on. So you make it much more practical to them. And in the same breath, you actually turn it around and you say, if this happened, how would you impact you as an individual? So you talk about GDPR, you've got the rights of access. You can get access to your own data. So you then say, if someone complains to you, or you've got an issue with Amazon and they're being uncomfortable with you, you can write into those people and say, I can have a copy of my data. So now turn that on its head. What you're writing down and what you're keeping, you have to be able to provide within 30 days. How would you cope with that? And again, I've worked with some recruitment companies who have written comments about candidates, and when you've told them that they can have access to them, they're looking at, they suddenly have all the colour drain out their face because they don't want that sort of information disclosed.
Yeah, of course.
So it's about awareness, understanding, and simplification. If you can make this stuff simple, everyone can follow it. Then the only difference is you have to manage is when people are over busy and are not sure, accidentally click on something, which is where you get a bit more
Okay, and so in that kind of simplification process, we have, there are lots of efforts to try and, especially from the government, to manage cyber risk. And one of the things I was reading about as well recently was early in March, the government published a research report about results from a pilot of broadly what they're trying to have is a cyber governance code of practice. And the government are setting out their expectations for directors of companies to govern cyber risk. And the way they're approaching it is they want directors to see cyber risk as the same as any other principal business risk, health and safety, any other type of risk, financial risk or otherwise. And part of that approach is that in the code, they're trying to set out best practice around incident and response. And my other impression from dealing with organizations is there's still maybe I've got it wrong, but there's still a feel that it won't happen to them. And so there is a situation where organizations don't have their people ready to respond. How do you get people on the ground, on the kind of shop floor level, ready to deal with incident and response with ease?
I think the first thing to say, it's never easy in these situations. It comes back to some of the old practices of just around practicing what goes on, and when there is an incident, how do you practice and working with people on doing this stuff. So have a plan, have an understanding of what you're going to do. Don't panic, because if you panic, you're already lost. If you do have the plan in place, you should have walked through it a good few times and understand what you're doing. Follow it. From a legal point of view, if it's a discoverable document and you do not follow it, then you can open yourself up to legal risk. Because if you go back to our point a couple of seconds ago when we were talking about vendor management, then actually they would have done sampling on your business continuity, they would have done some testing. Tell me about how you do this. If you then go all cowboy on them in the middle of an incident because it looked something like you should be doing something different, then you're exposing yourself to legal risk because you've now chosen to do something different. So you have a plan, you practice it, you roll it into different scenarios, you make sure it stands up. My humble opinion is always you have holistic plans, because if you have a plan for every type of incident, you'll have 1,000,001 plans, and it's always the one that pulls it. I had, when I had a proper job, I was responsible for business continuity for an organisation which had 70% of the asset management industry. Right. On one fateful day, The IT department took up both production and DR data centers in one foul swoop. We took out 70% of the asset management industry for a day over tax year end. Funny enough, I didn't have a plan for that scenario because I never thought they would ever do that to me. However, what we did have was a structure, a place. We'd run scenarios before. We'd been in those places. We knew how people would respond. We knew their behaviors. But I now need you to do this. Don't worry about all of this noise ever. Come and talk to me about this because I need you to make a decision.
And my impression is, I don't. Do you think enough organisations do run scenario planning?
No,
So
absolutely.
that's my impression as well. I think they've got the policy procedure. This is what we're going to do in the event, and I think it's a bit like, I talk about it with employee fraud or something of that nature. Talking through an event compared to living through it are two very, very different things.
Okay.
And the best thing you can do is, you can't do that on an employee fraud issue, but you can on a fraud situation. You can try and do a dry run about, okay, who would we call? What would we do? Where do we get the policies? What have we got to follow?
Exactly. And it just helps you understand what you need to know. So if one of your big suppliers isn't working for the day, what are you going to do? Do you care? Are you not going to do anything for the day? Or are you just going to sit there? Okay, that's fine. That's your appetite around how you do that. Who are you going to tell? Who's going to care? Are you going to send people home? If you're not available for a day, do you need to phone someone? It's about building up those steps and those thoughts of, actually, this has happened. I need to tell this person, and openness and communication on what you do. Or is it something more fundamental? You're a financial organization or a printer or something like that you need to be up and running quicker. Then what's your backup and how quick are you going to get up and running? And when do you make that decision? Because again, IT people are brilliant. Right? Give me 5 minutes and I'll fix it. Bob, that was 50 minutes ago. Yeah, but I just need 5 more. And sometimes it's those hard cutting decisions. You say, you know what? You're not going to do it. You're going to have to stop. I'm going to have to make a really hard call. I'm going to have to go to a regulator and my clients and my staff and take some brunt out of this. But I'm going to be open and I'm going to communicate fairly and say, look, we've got an IT problem. We'll do with the root cause afterwards and how we resolve it. But I'm going to give the guy a couple of hours to fix it. And this is what I'm doing in the meantime.
Is that your advice, though? If an organisation has, let's say a law firm, hopefully not ours, but say a law firm has a cyber incident and they are taken, let's say it's a denial of service, or some other incident. Obviously there's the risk assessment and then reporting to the ICO. But is your advice, well, you need to be speaking to those people who are in your trust to explain what's happening and be open about it? It doesn't that set alarm bells ringing for anyone in insurance risk thinking, oh my God, don't tell the world what was happened? It's
always a thin line. But what I've always sat on is integrity. I can recover from the truth. I can't recover from a lie. So if we have an outage now and you're not up and running until 3-4 o'clock this afternoon, and you have to then phone one of your clients and say, I said I had an IT problem. Guess what? Someone's stolen your data as well.
Yeah.
If you're open and transparent, and there is a thin line, and I get the management of reputation, but if you're open and transparent and have those conversations, this is what's happening. This is what I'm doing. Right. I've done this. I've done that. I've got this specialist team doing forensic stuff on the back of it. The IT guys are recovering it. Bear with me. Much easier position to manage than, I had that problem a few hours ago. I didn't tell you. And now they're going to be angry at you because you lied to them, and actually now they're in an even worse position because they need to make their own plans off their own back. Yeah, well, I think you said it really well. I really like that phrase. It's a lot easier to recover from the truth than from a lie. Let's talk about some of the threats out there. So how
how, you've got people in the larger organizations who've got dedicated teams that are looking at cyber threats. You've got medium and smaller organizations that might have that under the remit of IT. Where do people go to keep informed of the things that they don't know about, the unknown unknowns almost? And what are those threats people aren't thinking about at the moment that you're seeing that maybe some people on this call could learn from?
So good question. I think some of the biggest problems out there are around over complexity. I think as an industry, cybersecurity is made to be overly complex, and people struggle to understand how to manage that. You've either got consultants who turn it into an industry and scare the life out of you with certain things and big words. I worked with a really large Japanese bank who had a second tier accountancy firm working with them on things like GDPR, raising all sorts of issues and questions and problems, but it was nonsense because it didn't apply to them. You've got people trying to apply stuff and make it overly complex and then give you some massive spreadsheet or tooling to manage this stuff. But again, it's not practical and it's not sensible. So you're wasting your time. You've then got these amazing salesmen selling you some Willy Wonka style solutions for various cyber security, but they don't help. They don't manage the underlying problem. So simplification is the way to do it, because then you boil down to what actually is the right thing to do. So the analogy I always start with is the onion. It's a really old one, but it still works. So actually, when you're looking at things like cybersecurity, the first thing you do is you look at your perimeter. What goes in and what goes out? Can I control what goes in and what goes out? Yes. Then understand that, and then you do your perimeter checks and your penetration testing to make sure you haven't got any holes in the walls that you didn't know about. Now you've got a control. You know what goes in, you know what comes out, you're bound by regulation. You know that actually if I send this piece of paper, it's because it's for a contract.
Yeah.
I'm good. If it comes in, I know what's coming in. I'm in control. You've then got to start unpicking the middle of the onion, including things like individuals who love to click on you've just won £50, please click on this link, and it downloads some ransomware onto their PC. You've got to deal with that sort of stuff.
On that perimeter, sorry, Adrian, on the perimeter, you're looking at that. How do you're looking at what comes in and what goes out, but how do you understand what the threats are of what could come in? How do people stay on top of that type of ever-evolving kind of threat?
So the IT guys will do what vulnerability testing or penetration testing. So on a regular basis, they will test and probe those walls to make sure that the holes that are in there are understood and defined, and they're the ones that you want to have in place. They're only at a point in time things, so you have to do it on a regular basis, at least annually. I was made aware of a legal firm in Europe who didn't do penetration testing. And I said, well, how am I ever comfortable when I send you your data, you haven't got something on your network sniffing it and watching it? If you've got a good managed service provider, they'll actually be monitoring your firewall, and they'll monitor people who are trying to attack your wall for whatever reason. Some of it may be malicious, some of it may just be fun. We've all heard of even big American institutions being compromised by people in Basildon just because they're having fun in their bedroom. Yeah. It's a tick for them to try and do it.
And in terms of other types of threats, then, just thinking through these threats. So I was reading about, I don't know if you probably will have heard about this. I think it's called some cyber criminal software. I've got notes here about developers behind the Dracula phishing as a service platform. And they've now developed a new version enabling cyber criminals to clone any brand's legitimate website and create a phishing version. And these attacks are going out at scale. So we've had a client recently refer to us that they were impersonated. It was a subsidiary of an American company. They were impersonated to one of their legitimate suppliers. The suppliers sent goods out to an unknown third-party address, nothing to do with us, and now are suing them for the invoice. And they say, well, it's not us. You've been tricked. You've been impersonated. How can companies kind of react to that? Because if you've got no control of someone impersonating you, have you got any advice around things of that kind of risk?
That situation, you have to go to the various authorities. You'd have to go to the police and the national NCIS, because you're right, you don't have the control. So one of our clients tries to buy all sorts of domains up because things get interrupted in transmission, account details get changed and things like that. You try and buy all the domains you can, but at some point you have to give up and you have to go to them. And I've literally done it today. There was a situation where a random invoice was sent with different bank account details. We spotted it. We didn't pay out on it, but you're going to actually, you now need to be aware that someone may be in your network. So for those situations, if it always looks a bit different or it's coming from a different source, pick up the phone, have a conversation with them and say, I just want to make sure it's you. Because as the likes of Tony will always say to you, these people will continue to do this and do it because people will pay out on it. And then you've got some of the new fraud regulations where actually they will use it to their advantage and they'll actually make them money mule people to do it. Actually, I didn't get that. I need to get my money back from that. The big financial organisations give you your money back, and then they maybe get 50% from the criminal as well. And they're actively turning that into an industry for people and targeting vulnerable people to get money back out of the system.
Yeah, I could see, and that's the thing about, I guess, targeting. And I think just keeping on the threats theme, the other thing about targeting is not knowing who's going to target you. So one of the things I've had discussions of recently was about, obviously got lots of people using AI now. That's the kind of standard theme for some people getting their job done. But there was concerns about two things. One, as an organizations they have email usage policies, but they don't seem to have AI usage policies for their people. And it's because they don't understand what the threat is if people are using AI. So first thing, what do you know about in terms of the threat of AI and your organization's data being plugged into Copilot might be safer, but one of the others. And your data is going in there because someone's asked you to create an email to X and Y. What are the risks for organizations where employees are starting to use AI without controls?
I think you just said it yourself, they're losing control. So actually these people don't know where their data is, they don't know where it's going. The fact that sometimes they're using these bits of software creates that opening into the wall. So you know how we mentioned the onion. These guys are clicking on the button and it's now opening up the path. So you've just opened a vulnerability to the organization. So whereas it may look really innocuous that they're actually downloading and they're doing this and they're doing that and it all looks great on there, you've got no idea what goes on behind the scenes. So on that front, you need to have a policy and a procedure around corporately, how do we do this?
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that then the organizations will have ability to control what applications they're able to download. And then on the firewall and things like that, you can make sure that when something's being downloaded or there's an interaction between something, that it's only data you would expect to be going. So you're monitoring some of those transactions going out the door, because sometimes, and I've been in situations where someone's clicked on a Google link, and I know it's a slightly vector to where they've got an email through, your Amazon parcel's going to be delivered today. So you've got two mindsets, either what's the other half bought now and I don't know about it, or I don't remember clicking on things, but I'm not convinced I didn't. So you go and click on that link and it makes a call out to the internet that says, someone's now clicked on that and downloads ransomware, and it then locks up your PC. Really innocent stuff. But if you configure your IT bit right on the outside, actually it will block that callback out to the network.
Right. Okay.
So it's controlling what things people are able to do. So that comes down to acceptable usage, your ability to download software, your ability to upload things into the cloud and places like that. It's about understanding what you do with your data. Again, goes back to that onion idea of what's going in and what's coming out, and do you understand it? Is it done for the right reasons?
So it seems to me that, as organizations get kind of accustomed to their employees using AI for various tasks, be it presentations, be it preparation of a report, be it summarizing a document to report to a committee of some kind, they've got to be really conscious of privacy breaches. They've got to be conscious of regulatory breaches. And I think the suggestion is there should be AI usage policies put in place for pretty much every organization.
We are naive if we think that AI is not going to stay. AI will take control. It will take a much more interesting path. So I also sit on the CSBR. We had a session.
What's that stand for, Adrian?
The Cybersecurity Business Resilience Forum. So it's a policy session.
Okay,
so
great. Thanks.
The idea around that is around how do we help change the laws and regulations at the House of Commons for the good of business, rather than it being just a great idea and you could do something like this. We did a whole session on AI in healthcare, because it is coming, it is going to, and used properly will enable and make things much better. It's the used properly sentence which is the most interesting one. And how do you control that without stifling what it can actually do?
Yeah, so I think, there seems like this needs to be an underbelly, an underlayer of AI literacy that needs to be rolled out in organizations as well, which works in tandem with your kind of usage policy.
And can I also propose international understanding? Because otherwise most of us have some interaction with other countries in Europe or wider. If they have a different version of AI that's acceptable to them, how is it compatible with us? So we're now looking at a much bigger game of this is coming. A lot of the tech's being driven out of China and places like that, and that may all be great, but how do we understand and how are we comfortable that it all meets the same base standards? That means we're comfortable to use it within our organisations.
Okay. And then I guess coming on to when we set those base standards for our people and the people in organisations, back to that kind of first line of defence, the human firewall. We've got, as I mentioned, that government kind of code of practice that's coming around. Principle C of that code of practice is about people. So if the people are ultimately the read through for the threat, can we assume that they're going to protect us, our people? How in depth should training be on cyber threats, cyber risk for employees on the front line or the first line of defence?
Again, for me, this is about simplification. So you can spend your life training people in different elements of cybersecurity. It's a cottage industry. You can spend forever getting your employees to, are they ever going to touch it? Are they ever going to deal with it? Probably not. What you need to do is to be able to give them the flags that says, I don't like the look of that. That looks odd. This person said this, and to be able to escalate to people who do understand what they need to do. So how many times have we had very simple case, and it's very, very common, where the new member of staff is WhatsApped by the CEO, I'm really, really busy. I need you to go and get me some Amazon vouchers. I need this amount. Can you scratch off the back and then WhatsApp the details to them? Right? It's your CEO. You want to be really careful. You don't want to upset them, etc., etc. So then it's then about how do you control it and say, actually, I don't even know the CEO. Why would they know my mobile number? Actually, I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to tell my boss. I'm going to tell my boss. Just give it to my boss. And it's about dissolving that responsibility. Actually, I didn't like the look of it.
It's
So
environmentally friendly.
Exactly that. Yes, Drew. I've now told someone who can help me manage that problem rather than I don't know what to do about this, and I've had to cross-train them and things like that. Actually, give them the indication so they know what to do, and then they flag up the alerts for other people to really manage it.
And one of the things we see though is that where fraud comes around in a hyperbole, doesn't it? There's usually lots of pressures on people. I've talked about that busy and being overwhelmed. And they've got the standard stuff in their ear about they've had the sponsored communications from the CEO saying cyber threats are really important to the organization. We need to be really careful. Here's our policies, blah, blah, blah. But in the heat of the moment, I'm not sure people would challenge, or I'm not sure people would stand back and think. How do you create that culture in an organization where employees can challenge another, or they can stand back and think, and even if it means taking time away from their frontline role?
It's very easy to say this, but it's about creating a non-blame culture. So we've all been in organisations where say, yeah, it's okay if you don't do this, no one's going to shout at you.
Yeah,
we've all been there. We've all seen companies like that. But it is about doing that. I'd rather you tell me than there being a problem. And actually, then you go into some of your training and your education around phishing testing and things like that. And actually, when they are clicking on those buttons, then you go and you have a chat with them. Right? Actually, you clicked on that button. Why did you click on it? Because I was in a hurry. But you're not realizing, then you're educating them too. So then take it out of the office and say to them, okay, so when you're at home and you're on your laptop and you're doing something in the evening and your daughter clicks on the link and it takes out your internet for a week, what's your reaction? Well, I don't want that. Why would I want that? Now that's the view of the company. So actually, if there's one of these and you're not sure, tell your manager, let them have that escalation point.
And could we go further though? That okay, look, IT, the team, say it's the IT team that's covering everything in cyber. It's that not specified cyber security expert in a organisation. The IT team report to board or audit and risk, and they say, well, okay, we've stopped this many cyber incidents. So everyone's assured that things are being stopped. But I do think people on the shop floor, the employees, people doing the doing on the front line, see a lot of threats. But I don't know how many organisations you see where they're encouraged to feed back the threats they see to help build greater resilience. Is that part of the course, or am I just imagining that people don't do that?
I think it depends on where you're at. Certainly, all the organisations that I work with, it's seen as being a there's always thanks and reflection back to those people. Actually, thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing that for me. I've now seen this. I've now dealt with it. So it gives them a level of respect that they understand that you appreciate what they're doing. There is always the risk that everyone thinks it's an IT problem. IT will spot it. I don't need to do that. But then you've just got to make it understandable for these people, and that when there is an issue, come and tell us, because I'd rather you tell me 50 times and one of them be a problem than not tell me, and then you're going to bring the entire company up.
Yeah, okay. And I think
it's about balance. It's about
balance. It's about confidence from management, or confidence in management as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. And then you get into the crisis scenario. And sometimes when you've got management, one of the biggest problems with management sometimes is, I'll tell you what, let me deal with this project first, and then we'll get on to your cybersecurity stuff, right? And then this project finishes, and then guess what? There's another project that's also really, really important because it's going to bring money into the door. This risk gets bigger and bigger every time you don't touch it. So some of the things we now need to do is actually look at these risks. What are they? How do we manage it? How do we take proportionate steps along that road while I'm doing all of this stuff? Sometimes I've used scenario planning to exploit a potential weakness within an organisation. So you get your IT guys around the table, you have that conversation with them so you know what you're doing, right? And you have that conversation. If I clicked on one of these or I did one of these, what would happen to the company? And they'll be very open and descriptive. So then when you get into the board table and you're sat around the table, right, I've got this scenario and we're going through this. And the potential CIO or COO or someone goes, would never happen. Would you like to phone the IT department and confirm whether that's just happened or not?
Right.
And it creates that, pardon my bluntness, oh shit moment where someone then suddenly thinks, actually, now that is a problem. And how many of those do you think we actually get as an organisation? And what would happen if you did it? And it's not to say you need to pump millions and throw all sorts of resources into it. It's about proportionality, understanding where you are, understanding the risks, so the board understand those risks, and then you help them manage it. But then they're informed, and if it does go wrong, you've told them and you've dissolved some of your accountability because you said, this was a problem, I asked you to do this, you said no. That's your responsibility as a board director.
Yeah,
and at company's house.
And then when you take on, I suppose, those responsibilities as a board director, it's about being informed. And there's a lot of consultations, there's lots of law being proposed. You've talked about the Digital Operational Resilience Act coming into play. I've seen some other things. I don't know what we can maybe share just on a few minutes before we go to kind of any questions we've got. I should say, if anyone's got any questions, put them in the chat and we could try and deal with those just at the end. But I've seen something about a cyber security and resilience bill, something to help regulatory enforcement and mandated reporting. Do you know anything about this one yet?
So there's always new bills coming out. There is always talk around mandating reporting of incidents. That comes into DORA. If you're in the financial sector, you have to do it as part of SIS. The question I would ask is, how many people actually report it? Because there's a reputational impact of when they do it. So it goes back to some of your integrity. And likewise, there's rules around how much do you pay a ransomware, or do you tell someone you paid a ransomware? Who's going to put their hand up and say they admit to paying a ransomware? Some organisations will be brave to do it, but if you talk to Tony Sales, he'll say, if you pay it once, you'll pay it again. So guess what? I'm not going to give you that key back. So there is lots of stuff out there around how to look at this. There's the King's Resilience Bill, which no one knows the contents of yet. That's due to be dropped at any point in the near future.
Right.
These are all great things for us to do. The question I would always have is around managing that ambiguity around it, because they're never going to say, you have to do this and you have to do that. And that's done for two reasons. First reason is it allows flexibility of organizations to manage where they are. So you look at GDPR as a great example. It tells you have to have an appropriate cybersecurity in place. There's 53 people on this call at the moment. There will be 53 different versions of what's appropriate.
Yeah.
So it allows that, and that potentially also allows a regulator to have an out, because if there's an incident, he'll say, well, I didn't tell you exactly how to do it. I just said you needed to do it.
So it leaves open the scope. I mean, and that kind of scope and openness, I can see that the government are trying to pin down approach. You mentioned ransomware, so let's end on ransomware. So the latest thing I've seen now is the government have got a consultation on legislation about dealing with ransomware. And what they're trying to do is have a targeted ban on ransomware payments for critical national infrastructure and the public sector. They want ransomware payment. They want a ransomware payment prevention regime, and they want a ransomware incident reporting regime. You've already told me no one's going to be honest about the report, about reporting it and whether they've paid. So I'm not sure how they're going to mandate that. I mean, I guess the question I've got is, how realistic is it that we can legislate how organizations deal with ransomware when they are sitting there as an organization thinking our business is about to be on its knees unless we do X, Y, or Z. What's your general advice about ransomware? I mean, pay, not pay? That's always the question, that seems to be.
I think the easiest and the purest view would be you don't pay it, because if you pay it, then chances are they're going to do it again. That's much easier to say when your business is on the line. So you're literally about to go under. Actually, I need 10,000 Bitcoin to be able to happen it. It gives you a level of comfort, but it doesn't mean you're protected. So again, the organisation I was working with, they paid their first invoice, and you know what? The person switched the system back on, and they were up and running. It was absolutely fine until the person needed more money, and then was going to do it again for a much larger sum of it. So if these people have the keys to the jewels or keys to the locker, then they're going to open it whenever they want. So
yeah,
sometimes it's better to take that pain and to start to deal with the problem and move your IT to somewhere else who's in more control. I mean, sometimes it's not the IT department, in fairness. Other times it's a small organisation and they've always used John to do the IT. John's got himself in trouble for whatever reason. He's now blackmailing you. Well, actually, you need to find a better way of moving that out and eradicating that issue as an organisation. So if you've got a ransomware point and you've got a decent IT infrastructure, where can you back up to? What's your point? You can go to openness, communication, and procedures.
Well, let's round it up there. I mean, I think the key things you've been getting across are that integrity point about being truthful and, you know, being honest with what's happening in an organization, testing, being pragmatic, you know, lots of really good advice. Thank you for going through all of that, Adrian. So that's kind of zipped by almost an hour, which is, yes, pretty cool. So look, well, everybody, thank you for taking time to join. And those who are watching this back on a recording, thanks for making time to watch it if you've got this far. Hopefully some of the points Adrian's gone through, we've gone through today, are useful for your organisation or something to think about. Feedback for us is really helpful. If you could take some time just to answer a short Q&A questionnaire, which Paula will pop in the chat, that would be really, really useful for us. As you know, after these sessions, we send a copy of the recording out to everybody who's registered, as well as a kind of PDF e-flick book, which just takes through some of the key points Adrian's taken us through today. So that'd be really helpful for you to give the feedback, but hopefully the flip book and stuff will be also useful for you. And really lastly, if any of you on this call or your organisation think there's anything you'd like to talk through about today, or any wider issues on fraud, financial crime, be it on disputes, investigations or compliance, please get in touch with me, email me or email one of the team, or get in touch with Adrian. I'm sure he'd be happy to chat about anything. And we've just got a couple of minutes really left, Adrian. I guess I've got just one question really before we, you know, those, I think some people start to drop off now, but is there a kind of standard approach on, I think more I'm concerned about is denial of service. Is there a standard approach for an organization, whatever the size, if they have a denial of service attack, on how to respond or how to deal with that? Or is it very much a bit like litigation? Every case is like a snowflake. Everything's got something slightly different to it.
Snowflake is a great analogy, and I think pretty much most of them are. You need to understand where you are. Don't panic. Follow the plans and procedures you've gone through before. Contact your IT department. Have specialists lined up if you need to. Document everything, because if there is a litigation afterwards or a legal, they will ask you what you did, and there's worst thing in the world that you can get to is you're trying to recap, what did I say at this point and what did I tell someone and what decision did I make? So make those minutes, make those action and decision logs as you've gone along, and then hopefully you come out of it with the help of the police and specialists within the area, and just get you through it. But keep calm. Don't jump to panicking. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, because you're going to cause yourself more problem, and paying them isn't the right answer.
Okay, and then one last question before we call it a day. If you're going to simulate a cybercrime attack, I've got a question here from somebody. What scenario would you recommend is a good one to simulate for that dry run for that practice?
For me, it's always about keeping it simple and practical. So for most organisations, the simplest thing they can do is you clicked on a link. One of your members of staff clicked on a link and it's buried something within your network. And then you've either got ransomware, things have been locked up and you can't touch it, or you have someone phone up and say, I've got a copy of your data. And they are some of the most practical and sensible ways of going through that. It's about keeping it simple. So if you suddenly give the aliens have landed and this and that, the board have already switched off. If you can prove it's a real scenario that you could be facing as an organisation, and you're beginning to show that the pain that they will be going through, now they're interested, now they're bought in, now they're going to help you fight your cause, because you said this is a risk to you and this is likely to happen to us.
That's really good, really pragmatic. That's cool. Well, Adrian, thank you for taking time to join us today. Anybody, please get in touch with Adrian. He is brilliant. I think I've got a lot of time for Adrian and what AJC do, if you ever have any concerns or issues. And to everyone, thank you for making time. For those who managed to stay the full hour, appreciate it, and hope you have a good week. And I'm going to go sort my motion censored lights out one more time. Okay, we'll catch up on the next episode, which will run in May. We haven't set a date yet, so look out for it on your socials and some emails, and we'll let you know. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.